This is something that the governor has been very generous with his time with TwinWest, and we thank him very much for that. So Governor Mark Dayton was born in Minneapolis and raised in a house in Long Lake where his father still lives today. He has 2 grown sons, Eric and Andrew, and lives in St. Paul with his 3 German shepherds, Masabi, Mingo, and Itasca. He attended Long Lake Elementary School and Blake School in Hopkins. Governor Dayton loves hockey, and it was his childhood dream to be the starting goalie of the U.S. Olympic hockey team. He didn't make it. Done okay. But he was named to an all-state goalie his senior year in high school. He graduated cum laude from Yale University, where he also played Division I hockey. After college, he taught 9th grade general science for 2 years in a New York City public school. He still tells how it was the toughest job he ever had. It was where he realized the terrible injustice that his students had so little while he had been given so much. And he decided then that he would devote his life to improving social equality and economic opportunity for all Americans. For most of the past 34 years, the governor has served Minnesotans as commissioner of the Minnesota Departments of Economic Development and of Energy and Economic Development, as state auditor, and as a United States Senator. He has worked throughout our state to help businesses locate or expand and create jobs, to improve local government services, to better fund our schools, to support our servicemen and women, to help Minnesotans get the health care they need, and in many other ways to make a better Minnesota. I would also like to thank Governor Dayton for working closely with TwinWest and the business community during the past 2 legislative sessions to pass meaningful education reform measures, to streamline permitting for businesses, and for his support to fund transportation priorities, including one of our top transit projects, the Southwest Light Rail Transit. So please join me in a very warm TwinWest welcome for Governor Mark Dayton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. They sent you the long version of my resume there, although I find every decade my resume has gotten a little longer, you know, because a little more history there. But appreciate very much the chance to be with you. And, of course, you got your legislators here. They're the really important people this time of year. And I've been working with them, and we'll have more conversations, obviously, in the next couple of weeks. And I heard as I was coming in the response on the B2B. I want you to know that, as I said at the university the other day, I'm not just getting an earful of opposition, I'm getting a TCF stadium full of opposition. And I'm coming out next week with my revised budget based on the better revenue forecasts, and the B2Bs will not be in it, so you can all rest assured there. But, you know, I had dinner last week with about a dozen CEOs, founders of companies, Minnesota-based companies, dedicated Minnesotans, born and raised here. Nobody said they were going to leave or themselves or their companies, respected leaders in their industries and communities from across the state. And we went around the table, and each one took 5 minutes or more to talk about what they perceived the business climate to be and the like, and the situation in the state. And what struck me afterwards, I was really dismayed, but you know, because it's not something I've definitely heard before, but was this disconnect between their perceptions of the state and what I believe are the objective facts about the state and its fiscal situation. You know, in their view, Minnesota is a bad place in which to do business, and I'm threatening to make it worse. I believe the facts show that Minnesota's balanced approach to taxes and spending and investments in education have made it one of the best places in the country, in fact, in the world, to live, to raise a family, and to run a successful business. They believe that Minnesota is a high-tax, high-spending state. The facts show, and do you have the handouts? Yeah, okay. Yeah. The facts show that Minnesota's level of total state and local taxes and total state and local spending are falling relative to other states. That's the first handout there, the Minnesota Taxpayers Association. They put out an annual report, how does Minnesota compare? Just a couple pages there that show Minnesota's ranking compared to other states in both revenues and expenditures. And then something the Minnesota Chamber sponsored or championed back in the early 90s, the price of government, which is the amount of total state and local revenues or expenditures relative to total personal income for the state. And that's considered to be a good measure of whether this government is taking more or less, relatively speaking, of its share of people's incomes. And I would just, point out that again that one shows a significant drop over the time, and I'll get back to more of that later. But going back to my business friends, they believe that the state government is a profligate spending, ever-growing behemoth, whereas the facts show that state agencies have eaten inflation for the last 10 years, that state employees just received a 2% salary increase, their first raise in 3.5 years, and that we have major reforms underway, of which they were really totally unaware, including competitive bidding to manage the state health care programs, which will save Minnesota and federal taxpayers about $1 billion in the next 2 years. And it reminded me of how hard it is to change someone's mind once they believe something. And when they have believed it for so long that they're certain, then changing their mind is nearly impossible. Now, I served as the Minnesota Commissioner of Economic Development in 1978, and again in the early 1980s during the first 2 terms of Governor Rudy Perpich. Minnesota was said back then to have a bad business climate. Back then, the income tax was too high. Governor Quee indexed it to inflation. Still is a bad business climate. Workers' comp rates were non-competitive, driving businesses out of the state. Governor Perpich and the legislature corrected that. Large corporations wanted a 3-factor formula applied to their corporate tax. State complied. Then a 1-factor, which is now being phased in. Still, we have a bad business climate. And some of the CEOs of large corporations, I met with the Business Partnership Executive Committee twice now, about 30 to 40 each time, and both times they brought up this complaint that we have a high, corporate rate of 9.8%. And I said, well, how many of you pay that? Now, not a single one raised their hand. In fact, I'm told that it's for a large corporation in that situation, it's about 3 to 4%. The small businesses or medium, they're doing most or all of their business in Minnesota, is the ones who really get hit with an inordinately high rate, which I'd like to see us bring down. But they know that. And they still would prefer, just because it's just so customary, to badmouth Minnesota. Business executives claimed that property taxes, personal property taxes, were too high. The legislature eliminated the 3rd tier, the top tier, cutting property tax rates for the highest priced residents by over 1/3. Governor Ventura persuaded the legislature to cut all 3 income tax rates by between 11 and 13% in 1999 and 2000, reducing top income earners' state income taxes along with everybody else's. Still, their reputation, bad business state, high tax state, bad for business. And that bad reputation persists, and most business people in my experience in Minnesota believe that to some extent, or totally. And when I recite facts, as I just have, I can just see they're, going through, passing it out of people's consciousness like, water rolling off a duck's back. And in fact, thanks to Governor Ventura and Governor Plenty, they're the ones that deserve the credit, I don't. And most, during that time, in fairness, also DFL-controlled legislatures. Minnesota dropped, and that's another, on the Minnesota Taxpayer Association ranking, Minnesota dropped from having the 8th highest level of state and local taxes per $1,000 of personal income in 1996 to the 15th highest last year. So 8th to 15th in overall state and local taxes per $1,000 of personal income. Minnesota had the 11th highest level of total state and local expenditures in 1996. We now rank 25th. So we went from 11th to 25th. You're right in the middle of the states. Now, our tax ranking, as you probably noticed, is significantly higher than our spending ranking because we rank at the bottom. We rank 49th among the states in funding from the federal government, which might prove to be a relative advantage in these next years of sequestration and reductions. And the other measure I included in there of government spending, as I said before, the price of government, as you can see, has declined steadily from the 1990s to the present, and this current fiscal year, 2013, it's 15.2%, which is below the 23-year average of 16.2%. So now, why do all these facts matter? Because they set the context for our recent and our present budget debates. If Minnesota is an ever higher taxing and spending state, then continued increases are irresponsible and counterproductive. However, if taxes and expenditures have fallen significantly in both real and relative terms, then there's a much stronger case to be made for a balanced approach, combining more spending reductions with revenue and expenditure increases. Another chart that I provided, I think it's the next one there, it comes from the legislature. I can't vouch for its authenticity, but I always believe everything the legislature says. And that shows the graphs of the state responses to the budget deficits of the past decade. You can see that the increase in taxes was virtually non-existent. This is state taxes, so it doesn't include property taxes, which have gone up about 75% statewide over the last decade. And you can see also that they substituted quite a variety of fiscal games and gimmick shifts, delaying aid payments, delaying tax rebates to businesses, borrowing, endless fee increases, and of course, major spending reductions. Yet for many of the legislators and for many people in Minnesota, not only is that not enough, but it's like it didn't even happen. So their response now is just cut more, cut more, cut more, and that's become their answer to every budget problem we face. And they lost sight of the fact, or don't ever know, that we have made cuts, significant cuts. In education, for example, the state spending for higher education, that budget line, which includes the University of Minnesota, the MnSCU campuses, and student financial aid, was cut. Myself and the legislature in 2011, we had a $6 billion deficit we were facing, cut by an average of 13% from the last biennium to this one. The University of Minnesota is over 14%. And now, this current 2 years, in real after-inflation dollars, the state funding for higher education is the lowest it's been since 1980-81, over 30 years ago. We rank, again, according to those national rankings, 32nd among the states in spending on higher education. K-12 is the same story, although we did reverse the legislature, and I did reverse 2 years ago and for this biennium. But previously to that, the previous decade, in real dollars, state support for K-12 education was cut by 14%. We went from the 5th best state in support of K-12 education in 1996 to 33rd most recently. It's quite a precipitous drop. Now, it wouldn't matter so much if low taxes were all that mattered in determining states' economic prosperity. If the lowest taxes equaled the highest job growth and the highest per capita income, well, then public policy would be clear and simple. However, that's not the case, as the next chart indicates, which shows states with the lowest taxes and most cases correlate with having quite low ranking on personal income, as well as quite low ranking on job growth. Which says then that there are other factors that are just as or even more important in business decisions. Why do businesses locate or expand in Minnesota? Number one reason I've always heard is well-educated, hardworking, extremely reliable, and productive workforce. That's been our crucial advantage. It's the reason why DigiKey is thriving in Thief River Falls and now employs over 2,200 people and is looking to find more people so they can expand further, because they keep an inventory of components that are purchased by people all over the world of 450,000 stock-keeping units. And they fulfill orders worldwide within 24 hours at a 99.6% rate of perfection. And that story is repeated all over the state. That competitive advantage that comes from dedicated, hardworking people. We know now, we're told of the studies that higher education will be even more important in determining in the future who succeeds and who struggles. So we need to be educating our young people for the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past. There's presently about 160,000 Minnesotans who are unemployed, and there are also 65,000 jobs in the state that are unfilled because there are no applicants with the skills required. So many jobs that used to be performed with high school education now require specialized skills and training. Another River Falls company, Articat, is looking for students with training in mechanical drafting. And right across the highway, Highway 59, is the community college, and they teach architectural drafting. Now, I don't know the difference, but Articat does. And it just illustrates the disconnect between what is going on in the educational system and what's, the needs of businesses are, and we need to get that retuned. And I give Chancellor Rosenstone great credit. He's been all over the state. He's been to every campus community, and he's engaged in those discussions with business leaders there about how they can recalibrate, but it's a work in process. We Minnesotans have always, we've always earned our success. It's never been given to us. I always said, the good Lord gave us winter, used to. We don't have winter this year back, so, snow, but no, not a single mountain. In which case I would have become a skier instead of a hockey player, but that's probably just well. We don't have ocean, and warm winters that people can escape to. We don't have North Dakota's now, incredible advantage in oil and gas resources and the like. We've always earned our success, and it doesn't come free, and people never expected it to. There's what's called the Minnesota Miracle occurred back in 1971. I did some reading a couple weeks ago to sort of get a measure of that and hopefully a little inspiration. And that was the largest tax increase in Minnesota history. I mean, it was a miracle, but the miracle didn't come from up above. The miracle came from the people of Minnesota, from the visionary leaders, both parties. There's a Republican-controlled legislature and a DFL governor then worked together. Largest tax increase in Minnesota history. Income taxes increased by 22%. Now, I'm not contemplating that, I want to assure you. But the people supported it. And they reelected the people in the next election who were the principal advocates for it. As the money went to funding K-12 education and shifting the primary source of that education funding from the local property tax to the state income tax. Well, my initial budget proposal in January was intended to also increase state support for education from, now it's actually E through PhD. It's early childhood education all the way through postgraduate. And to shift part of that funding from the property tax to the income tax. Well, the reaction to it confirmed the adage that everyone's for change as long as it doesn't affect them. And broadening the base of the state's sales tax to include most services has been, while it's been a top recommendation of every tax study group over the last quarter century in Minnesota to both increase the budget stability and to better reflect our economy's present and future, my proposal obviously lacks public support, even though most Minnesotans would see a reduction in their overall state and local tax burdens, and thus it properly lacks legislative support. And now it lacks mine. I worked for Fritz Mondo when he was a senator, and he said once, I've known a lot of stupid politicians, but I never knew one who couldn't count. My revised budget proposal, which I'm finalizing this weekend and will be announcing early next week, continues most of the $2 billion in spending reductions, which the Republican-led legislature and I made 2 years ago. $2 billion in reductions from the forecasted level of spending in health, human services, education, higher education especially, and others. And all that money, all those cuts carry forward to the next biennium unless the legislature acts to change that. My budget also raises the necessary revenue to overcome the $627 million deficit that's projected for the next 2 years, as the Constitution requires us to do. 2 years ago, we were facing a $6 billion deficit when I arrived, and now we're down to $627 million, so it's about one-tenth, and that's definitely improvement. And in fact, from the last forecast of the legislature in 2011, and I based our final budget balancing on to today, the most recent forecast, the state's generated $2 billion of surplus through higher revenues from more people working, businesses being more profitable, and also from reduced spending, especially in the healthcare area. But that $2 billion, rather than going forward and giving us a good cushion with which to start the next biennium, by law goes to repay the school districts, whom we owed $2.7 billion at the high point, and now we paid off $1.9 billion of that, so we're down to $800 million, but it still means we start the next biennium with a deficit that we have to overcome. It's like a business or like a family. You get yourself in debt, you got to work your way out of it, and it costs more, and you got to put money into paying off the debt that you see other uses for, and it's hard, but it's the reality. And we're not going to use games or gimmicks or other false pretenses for budgeting as long as I'm there, and we're going to be honest about it and straightforward and take our medicine, and then we'll move ahead. My budget also makes significant new investments to improve the education of Minnesotans at all levels, from expanded early childhood education to optional all-day kindergarten for children statewide, both critically important. One parent of a suburban public school kindergartner said that they are paying $4,200 for a child to have access to all-day kindergarten in the public system. And another family told me in the metro area that they pay $2,100 for a half day for their kindergartner. So, the experts, and some of them have been saying it for a long time, say that early childhood education and I think it should be a continuum. So all-day kindergarten is crucial to improving the readiness of young children to enter first grade. And it's estimated now that some 40% of Minnesota's children are not, as they measure it, prepared, quote unquote, or ready for beginning of their formal education. And also closing the achievement gap, which is one of the worst in the countries. And then to continue that improvement all the way through college and high school and college, especially training students for the good jobs in the modern era. I'm told by a couple of Microsoft officials that they presently have 2,600 job openings for people with computer science degrees or experience. Starting salary is $105,000. With the benefit package, it's over $200,000 a year. Half my staff is now filling out applications. But, why don't we want every junior high school student in Minnesota, every high school? I mean, if you don't computers aren't your thing, you don't want to force yourself somewhere you don't want to go. But if see an opportunity to step out of college and start earning $105,000 a year, I would hope that would motivate a lot of kids and give them a sense of what direction. And we should be given that sense in junior high and especially by high school, of which we're going to be the job opportunities. Now, jobs will change, and a lot of the jobs 10 years from now haven't even been invented today. But still, we need to give them better guidance, and then we need to give them the training and experience, and that requires the state colleges and universities, particularly in the MnSCU system, to acquire new curricula and new technology and new equipment. I've been to China 8 times. I've seen some of the 1.3 billion people there who are very motivated, very hardworking, and are willing to do so for 40, 50 cents an hour. We and our children and our grandchildren are going to have to out-invent them, out-innovate them, out-manage them, and outperform them if we're going to maintain our world economic preeminence. and better education will be absolutely key to that success. So I believe my budget presents a balanced approach to reducing old spending, increasing it in key areas like education and economic development, and providing a fairer tax system without the B2B tax. However, governors propose and legislatures dispose. So now it's a turn of the 201 legislators to act and take guidance from all of you and other leaders throughout Minnesota and put us back on a track to a better state. And I think we'll make progress in that direction over the next couple of months. Thank you very much. Be glad to respond to questions.
Thank you, Governor Dayton. We're in the back of the room over here. Hi. We did have a question on the B2B tax, the business-to-business tax, but thank you for your breaking news this morning. It's already gone viral in social media and all across Minnesota with a lot of praise coming from certainly the business community and beyond. We'll move on to another question, however, and I've got Matt Shadow of Ameristar Agency who would like to ask you a question.
Thank you. Governor Dayton, for my small business, when it comes to the healthcare exchange, I would not offer my employees coverage through the exchange unless they have access to a broad range of choice, both in terms of companies and products. What do you want to see in the final exchange bill that's going to offer that range of choice for my employees?
Well, both that array of choices, up-to-date, accurate, and so they can make comparisons for themselves online, and yet still comprehensible. Met yesterday with one of the Republicans involved who's been involved in the health exchange formulation, and he brought in one of the smaller insurance companies in Minnesota, and we were talking about their concern is whether the board of the exchange would have the ability to say no, you can't put that product on our system, and also then what the limit would be on the number of products that any one company could display. And obviously each individual insurer wants to put more online, but my concern is you have the cumulative effect. People like me who are computers late in life don't have the facility to just go link, and if we overwhelm people with this, especially in the beginning, it's going to really be counterproductive, and we're going to have people just turn off the set and do something else. So trying to find that balance, and I don't know exactly what it is between, giving that opportunity and then presenting the information, as I say, up to date and accurately, and then not making it user-friendly and not overwhelming people is really trying to thread the needle there. And, this is a gargantuan undertaking. I've never seen anything like it in terms of state government going from like 0 to 60, in less than a year. And we're creating this out of whole cloth. We are one of the 4 states, I'm told by the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Washington, along with Oregon, Washington State, and Maryland, 4 in the lead in terms of designing, and I think we will design a better program than the states that are opting to let the federal government do it and just go along with that. But it's not going to be perfect, and especially in the beginning. So we're going to have to ask for a little forbearance. But if it's going to be successful, your employees are going to be able to go and see where they get better coverage at a lower cost ultimately for you, lower cost ultimately for our society. And if that doesn't work, then it's going to be back to the drawing boards with a lot of fear.
Governor Dayton, we have a question from Mike Lehman of Ferguson Enterprises on transportation and transit.
Thank you, Governor. And as Danette said in her introduction, I really, on behalf of the TwinWest Board of Directors and the entire community, appreciate your support for the Southwest Light Rail Transit System. In addition to that, we're very concerned with the third lane at 494 here. As you know, through Plymouth, it's the only portion of the entire Twin City circuit that doesn't have a third lane. So we would request your support in getting that taken care of too. However, we're a little concerned with some of the agencies in our state in terms of support for moving us forward on infrastructure and transportation issues to further business development, moving goods all throughout the area. So the question is, what do you think we should do, or what can you ensure we can do to improve and compete nationally on our transit and infrastructure system?
So just so I understand, you're saying that there are state agencies who are opposed to that?
Not opposed, they just don't fund them properly and stuff, and we're lacking when I compare other states and stuff in terms of nationally competing to attract millennials, et cetera.
Well, we have, that's one of the areas where we have fallen behind considerably relative to other states' efforts and relative to the growing need. And so we got, increased congestion in the metro area and increased deterioration of our trunk highway system throughout the state. And, for 20 years, except for that one gas tax increase, which was, helpful, but I mean, the gas tax now has been eclipsed by the cost of these projects. And so, we're suffering the consequences. It's great to say, well, we're not going to increase taxes for transportation-related activities, but you don't say that for 20 years, and then chickens come home to roost. So we had a task force that I authorized, that former Commissioner Tom Sorrell, who spent every dollar he was provided by the legislature and the Congress, I can assure you of that. And he shepherded us through, and it came out with a report of, I think it's $20 billion in 12 years, or $12 billion in 20 years, I can never, one or the other. And we have, since Tom decided to move on and get out from under my oppression, Charlie Zelli, who's a very successful businessman, family, and he now runs Jefferson Line, so he has some transportation experience, and he hopefully is going to bring some business creativity to this, because we need to. The problem with increasing the gas tax further is that it doesn't get us where we need to go, and we're going to have to look at some more creative way, and other states have this problem too, of financing these projects. I mean, the cost of the environmental impact studies and the engineering and design costs more now than it used to be to build the highway when I started out here, and so we're seriously behind. And what I'd like to do, and I don't think we'll be able to in this session, but afterward, hopefully things quiet down a bit, is have Charlie just go on the road and really engage with people all over the state and just say, these are the options. We keep spending the same amount now on transportation that we have been. This is what's going to happen. The roads are going to continue to deteriorate and become more congested. If we spend this amount, we'll keep it where it is. And if we spend this amount, we'll make it world class. And then people can decide collectively, what they're willing to commit to. I really appreciate the Twin support for the light rail. We're late to the era of mass transportation, and I've been to China and taken the maglev train, which goes from downtown Shanghai to the airport at 230 miles an hour, and the high-speed trains that go 180 miles an hour. So when we talk about the speed of our transit system, we're coming out of the dark ages, relatively speaking. But we're coming out of it, and we got to keep making that investment. And 494, yes, that one, and watching the line of people trying to get on 394 going west this morning, was what came out here to TwinWest Chamber meeting. I'm once again, confounded by the idiocy of previous MnDOT generation. For taking what could have been 4 continuous lanes with the right-of-way and turning it into that fiasco. But so we got to do it. We have to do it intelligently as well as invest more in it.
Thank you, Governor. I have Phil Kronloggy with BPK&Z who would like to ask you a question.
Hi, Governor. I'm a president of a CPA firm here in Golden Valley, and we have over 300 business clients that we work with. And most of them are what we call pass-through entities, where the income from the business is taxed on the individual tax returns. And so the 4th tier tax rate is going to have a severe effect on these businesses to have cash to grow their businesses and to hire more people and to expand the tax base in the state. Is there anything that you can do to help these people? I know you're interested in lowering corporate tax rates, but that doesn't help the pass-through
Understand.
businesses.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, you said the income's passed through, but it's the profits of the company that are passed through to the owner. And, you know, I mean, we, as I said before, if we were in the context of we're just, you know, throwing money out the door in government and not, you know, caring about that and so forth, it'd be one context. But if you look at the context of, you know, what's happened to our schools, and I had a group of teachers in yesterday, and one ninth grade science teacher has 42 kids in his class, and you know, you look at that kind of deterioration of because of lack of funding for especially education. And I mean, if we continue on that course, you know, we're going to have a much worse state. And you know, our kids and grandkids, you know, may be successful, but they need everybody in their generations to be successful in order for the whole society to be able to afford these things and also function. So the money's got to come from somewhere. And the facts show that middle-income family pays 26% more of its share of it, higher share of its income in state and local taxes than the top 1%. And so, you know, my ethic is if you make more money, you pay more in taxes, you know, and now the ethics become you pay less or you pay nothing or you get a rebate. And I just think that's going to be, you know, the death knell of this state and this country. Look at the federal deficit now. You know, when I came to the Senate in 2001, Bill Clinton, Democratic president, Republican Congress, and a good economy, had balanced the federal budget. Not the whole budget, but the operating part of the federal budget for the first time in 29 years, 2 years in a row, and a $180 billion a year surplus in Social Security. We were having discussions, how far do we pay down the national debt to get ready for retirements and all? And then two big tax cuts and 2 wars and 2 recessions later, and now we're over $1 trillion a year in deficits. We're hemorrhaging, and you know, nobody will raise taxes and cut spending, both. I mean, it's self-suicidal in economic terms. I mean, nobody can continue on that basis. And, you know, we're in debt. You know, our kids, look at that chart again on how this problem was solved in Minnesota last decade. All those shifts got to be repaid. Borrowing will repay with interest over time. We're taking current projects and current consumption and putting it on our children and grandchildren. And I don't, you know how we're going to look them in the eyes and explain to them, you know, why we would do that to them. So, I understand that nobody likes paying more taxes, and I understand that, you know, everything matters, and you know, every tax theorist I've ever seen points out the negative side of any tax. But we need the money to be able to function. And as I said, if we get out of this deficit situation, if we just started with a level playing field, we wouldn't have to raise anybody's taxes in this session in order to generate the additional revenues for education. But we're not there yet. We're not out of this hole yet, and so we need a little more revenue to do so.
Governor, I have one more question for you to be mindful of your schedule this morning, and it's Lee Anderson of General Mills.
Hi, Governor.
Hi, Lee.
I wanted to thank you for your administration's great work on government efficiency. The government has adopted a lot of our lean principles that are used by employers in this room, including ours. And I know you also have some initiatives in your budget to expand those lean efforts throughout state government. Can you talk a little bit about those and the progress on them and other opportunities that business can use to help government be more efficient in their spending?
Well, General Mills has been tremendous, starting with under the last year or two of Governor Plenty's administration, been assisting state agencies in developing a lean approach. I decided we'd put it in the governor's office and lead by example, and the problem was whenever they got to the point of where the services got congested, it was me. But you know, we are using that and other administration forms of better management and administration. The legislature 2 years ago, bipartisan, one of the most conservative members of the House, one of the most liberal members of the House, famously hugged on the House floor when this consolidation of all the IT systems in the state was passed. And that's another mammoth project, but it's, moving along well, and that's going to result in major efficiencies, better consistency across one agency to another, and reduction overall. I mentioned Commissioner Jessen came into the Department of Human Services, which is just, it's one of the reasons cost of government keeps pushing up is we have more and more people who turn to government as their recourse for what they need, and we have, she manages 200 different residential facilities for about 85,000 people in Minnesota. We're going to have, after this healthcare exchange transfer, in 2 years, we expect to have close to 1 million people in Minnesota who are receiving part or all of their health insurance covered from government sources, state or federal. That's almost 1 out of every 5 Minnesotans. And half of those used to depend on their employer. And now it's becoming unaffordable, and a lot of businesses can't afford it. But we're the repository for the people that have the highest needs, and therefore the highest costs. And we're going to keep working to get efficient. I mean, every year, as I said, there hasn't been an inflationary increase in the state agency budgets in 10 years. Every 2 years, they just, figure out what positions don't we fill, how can we cut? And a lot of that has been very good, because there was room to be cut. But it's like the schools. At first, you're cutting maybe a bit of fat, but then you're cutting into muscle and bone, and finally getting into the vital organs, and that's where it gets serious. So I appreciate very much all that you have done, General Mills, and been terrific in your own leadership on that as well, and we'll continue to work very, very hard at that. Tina Smith, my Chief of Staff, spends over half her time focused on that, and she was General Mills executive when she came here from the Dartmouth Business School, so she's good training. So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate very much your courtesy and being here, and we'll look forward to moving ahead.
All right, again, thank you very much to the governor. Very busy schedule, and for also having this be where his announcement that the B2B business is going to be out of his budget proposal. Thank you. I guess we'll reserve some judgment till we see how that is filled in. But thank you very much, and thank you to all of our legislators who are here today. This is just such a privilege at TwinWest. And I would also like to take a little bit of what we saw today and talk about the importance of being heard. So obviously the business community had a large reaction to some of the proposals, and that's what it is in working with our government. It's a give and take in conversation. And so I want to remind everybody, there is still time to register for the Business Day at the Capitol. It is on March 13th. You can contact Judy Johnson for details or go to the TwinWest website. But it's incredibly important that our voice is heard. And what we heard today is that our voice being heard does make a difference and does influence. So I want to ask everybody to seriously consider participating in that day. Also, I just want to, again, thank you all of our sponsors, Grand Casino Mille Lacs and Hinckley, Allina Health, Comcast, Centerpoint, Walmart, Lockridge, Grindle, Nowen, Pound America, Finance and Commerce, Voyager Bank, and also our Breakfast March series sponsor, Minnesota Private College Council, Xcel Energy, and PSAV. So everybody, we are letting you out early today, so we might keep you a little late next time. But have a fabulous Friday and even better weekend. Thank you, everybody.